Hey guys, welcome to my channel. This is a quick tutorial on how to use watercolors for calligraphy. In this video, we'll talk about watercolors for pointed pen specifically versus faux calligraphy using a watercolor brush. We'll talk about what materials to use as well as a step-by-step guide on how to use the watercolors with your pointed pen. Let's dive right in. All right. Before we dive right in, I just wanted to say that I am not a watercolor expert, but I have been practicing calligraphy for the past 2 years or so. So yeah, first you'll need some paper, preferably smooth since we'll be using our pointed pen. You are able to use textured paper, but it just requires a little bit more technique in terms of, making sure the nib doesn't catch on the fibers. But for the sake of this tutorial, we're going to use a smooth, thicker quality paper, not just your regular computer paper, because the watercolor will just seep right on through. You'll need your pointed pen, of course, a glass or jar of clean water, a paper towel, a watercolor brush. I actually use this flat brush when I'm using watercolors for calligraphy, but I hear that a round brush is typically recommended. But use whatever you had on hand. For a while I only had this flat brush, so that's what I used. You'll also need a pipette of some sort filled with some clean water, and of course your watercolors. This is my favorite brand of watercolors that I've used so far for calligraphy. It's by the Creative Kinds, and you can find them on Instagram and Etsy. I highly recommend them. But yeah, you'll need some watercolors. So these are the ones I'll be using today. So I picked this beautiful color shift. It's called Tangerine Sky. The first thing we're going to do is take your pipette with the clean water and drop maybe a couple drops of water on the top. With watercolors, you need to let the water sit for a couple minutes to kind of activate the color. So we'll do that. Once the water has sat for a minute or two, you're going to take your brush. Again, I typically use a flathead watercolor brush, but other calligraphers do recommend a rounded brush. So you're going to take your brush and you're just kind of going to swirl the color around like that. Okay, so now we have our color ready to go. Okay, so next you're going to take your pointed pen. You're going to take your color with your watercolor brush, and you're going to just place it on your nib. Like so. Now we're ready to write. So with the color on your nib, you're just going to write like you normally would with your pointed pen. Like that. So when your watercolor is starting to look a little dry, just like this one, you can kind of see, not that it's goopy, not sure if that's the right word, but it's more pigment than it is water. And until you kind of use watercolors for your calligraphy more regularly, you'll eventually kind of be able to tell when the watercolor is too thick to be used with your nib. So sometimes, depending how dry my watercolor pen has gotten, I will go in with the pipette and do like one more drop of water. But if, let's say, I'm almost done writing my word and I need just a little bit more, I'll take my watercolor brush that actually usually has some pigment on it still. I'll like barely dip it into my water jar that I was using to clean my brush and just add a little bit more water that way, just enough. When your watercolor pan is too dry, the pigment will be too thick to run down your nib onto the paper. If it's too much water in your pan, it'll come out really liquidy, just like any other like black ink you might be practicing with. So you just kind of have to play around with the consistency to see what works best with your nib and the watercolor that you've chosen. And that's how to use watercolors with your pointed pen for calligraphy. I definitely recommend that you try, especially if you've been wanting to add a little more color to your calligraphy practice. But do remember that not all watercolors are made equally for calligraphy. I haven't tried a lot of different brands of watercolors with my pointed pen, so I can't say if each type of watercolor will give you the same results, but it doesn't hurt to just try and experiment and have fun along the way, so I definitely recommend it. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know in the comments below if you're interested in any other type of calligraphy tutorials or topics, and watch my latest video here. Thanks so much. Hope to see you in the next one.